All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to the very first episode of Almost Athletic. Thank you for hanging tight. We had a bevy of technical difficulties, as you would expect going live for the very first time. There's a chat somewhere on here. I don't know where it is. I can't see it, but I will find it. So as we go along, certainly interact and let me know what you think. So yeah, here we are. We're gonna break down this Ohio State Georgia um, matchup that we've got here. So a couple things before we get started. This is it's kind of like a mini series. We're gonna do 5 episodes. First episode will be we're gonna be breaking down today C.J. Stroud versus Stetson Bennett, which is Georgia's quarterback. And then next episode we're gonna be going over receivers, secondary. Then we're gonna do running backs, linebackers, and then um, we will absolutely be going live on game day. Yeah, we'll compete with game day. It should be perfectly fine. Um, this is a bigger, better show in every way. So, yeah, what we're going to do, we're going to be breaking down all this stuff leading up to the game. Um, and hopefully, Ohio State will have a good outcome, but we'll see. So, obviously, as you can see, if you're new to the Common Dad, or you're, of course, new to this, I'm a giant Ohio State fan. I will try to be as unbiased as I possibly can. Actually, I think I'm a little harder on them than I would normally be. So I don't know. We'll see. And I've been watching. You'll laugh at this. I've been actually watching a good bit of film on Georgia because I don't watch a lot of their games. I do live here in Georgia, so I'm certainly around their fan base. And the two fan bases couldn't be at different places. This Ohio State fan base, if you're a Georgia fan, is known for being very cocky, very chesty, very proud, arrogant, a lot of horrible things, really. And 9 times out of 10, that's what we are, especially in the last 20 years, as we should be. Um, Big Ten champs, beating down Michigan, national champions. But the last 2 years have been bad, and this year was an explanation point on that. Um, Not only have we lost to Michigan twice in a row, but they've kind of beat down Ohio State 2 years in a row. And yeah, a lot of people feel like Ohio State has backdoored their way into the playoffs. And it kind of feels like nobody's more angrier than that than Ohio State fans. There's still a large section, well, I wouldn't say large section of the fan base, but small but loud part of the fan base that I don't know if they don't want to be here, but they, feel like Ohio State doesn't deserve it, which most of the country feels like that. To which I would say, deserve is a moving target. Most years, Ohio State wouldn't deserve to be here and would not be here if you look at all the things that have had to happen for Ohio State to get here. It's extremely lucky, especially if you look at stuff that happened at the beginning of the season. Florida beating Utah week 1, I think, and Florida is a bad football team. Um, but if Florida doesn't beat Utah, Utah's probably in over us. Um, and plenty of other upsets in the Pac-12 that have happened. If Oregon doesn't lose another game, they're probably in over us. Maybe even Washington, and then obviously everything that happened championship Sunday. So yeah, we Ohio State definitely backdoored their way in. They're definitely lucky to be here. Um, and the fan base is not all that confident. It's kind of weird because, like I said, it's normally a very confident, cocky fan base. And if you talk to any Ohio State fan right now, we don't really know how to feel because we're still kind of licking our wounds from this Michigan beatdown. But we're also excited, so it's kind of strange. It's a mix of emotions, and we're still 2.5 3 weeks away from kickoff. So there's still time to kind of figure out even where we are with that. And like I said, I live here in Georgia, and this fan base right now in Georgia couldn't be any higher. and they haven't been any higher since the 80s, coming off of, their championship with Herschel Walker. So right now, they in their minds they are completely unbeatable, untouchable. They're not worried about Ohio State. Um, the most hesitation I've seen is they're a little upset that they didn't get TCU as opposed to us because they feel like TCU, the number one seed should be rewarded a a better or a worse opponent, I should say. And they didn't get that. They felt like they got the better of the two opponents in Ohio State, but they're still not worried. They still feel like they have an elite defense. They still feel like their offense is actually one of the best in the country, and they would be right if you haven't watched a lot of Georgia games this year, which I don't expect you probably have. Very efficient offense. So yeah, they're very, very chessy right now, very proud, and they're not worried about this game at all. Um, and I don't get the sense that their players are either. But it's always hard to tell from the outside looking in really how the players are feeling. So it's very interesting where these fan bases are coming from. Um, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of edge each team will play with because you kind of feel, as an Ohio State fan, you hope that Ohio State will play with that edge, that Rocky had in Rocky 3 after he got beat down. You hope that's what shows up, but we don't really know because we in 20 years we have never seen an Ohio State team be this kind of down in the dumps. We don't know how they're going to react. We just don't know. Um, so we'll see. But we know how this Georgia team is going to play. They're going to play with confidence. I don't think there's any chance of them overlooking us for several reasons. The main reason, this is a college football playoff game. They're not overlooking anything. Um, and really, if you're Georgia, you probably feel we may be their biggest threat just because of how we can move the ball up and down the field through the air. So I don't think there's any chance of that. And of course, there's the fact it's Ohio State. Everybody hates Ohio State. Georgia, Ohio State, two blue bloods. You're just not going to overlook that game. Even if this was a week 5 matchup and these were two bad football teams, just because the helmets, the jerseys, that nobody's going to overlook this game. So I don't anticipate any sort of letdown on Georgia's side. I think you're going to see. I think we're going to get the best of both teams, which is good. That's what everybody wants. So let me stand up here before we get into this thing. Let's take a look at what we got here. I'm trying to find these comment sections. I want to see what everybody's thinking, but I don't know where it is, but we'll find it here eventually. So let's jump into this matchup. Now, with all of our other episodes, a lot of these are going to be, receivers versus secondary. We're going to see personnel versus personnel. We're going to see how that equates and how those matchups looks. With quarterbacks, it's a lot more mental because obviously they're not playing each other. So we'll talk about how the quarterbacks match up with the secondary a little bit, but it's going to be more mental. So just to kind of give you a rundown, if you are an Ohio State fan who hasn't really followed Georgia, I'll let you in a little bit on who Stetson Bennett is roughly. So hometown player, he's from Georgia, 5'11", he's 190 pounds. So, I mean, you wouldn't pick this guy out of a lineup at a YMCA basketball pickup game. He's just a normal looking dude. He walked on to Georgia. He actually left. He went to a community college. And then a year later, Kirby Smart wanted him back, got him on scholarship. He beat out, JT Daniels, DeJuan Mathis for the starting job. And then, of course, as we all know, 2 years later, he won the national championship. And he was good last year. He was good, but he was not the main focus of that team. That team last year was, if you remember, that defense was an all-time defense. So he didn't have to do much last year. He just kind of had to manage the game, manage the flow, don't turn the ball over, and we'll be fine. And eventually that's what happened. Georgia ended up sealing the national championship on a pick six, and he had a good game, but he wasn't the reason for it. This year, very different. He's kind of what makes their offense go. I would say, I don't want to say he's their best player because they got a couple tight ends that are Sunday guys for sure. But very, very good quarterback. So very different player from last year. He's a very smart player. You couldn't have had two different backgrounds. So everybody knows CJ Stroud if you're an Ohio State fan. If you're a Georgia fan, CJ Stroud, five-star prospect. He was recruited by everybody in the nation out of California. He's prototypical. He is a pocket quarterback, Ohio State fans. Let me say that again. He is a pocket quarterback. He's not a running quarterback. There's a huge part of the fan base that wants to see him break out and run. This guy is not Justin Fields. He's not Braxton Miller. He's not JT Barrett. He is none of those things. He is a pocket quarterback who can occasionally run. We wish he would run a little bit more, but quite frankly, he's not very good at it when he does. I'm fine if he doesn't. He can't slide. He doesn't know when to get down. He it's not good. So he's a true pocket quarterback. So you won't see him run very much, although he is pretty athletic. And he is a bigger guy. He's 6'2", 218, so he's a little bit bigger than Stetson Bennett. So that's kind of how they stack up. So if we look at the yards, also very interesting. Very, very similar. CJ's coming in with 3,340, 37 touchdowns, 6 picks, 66.2% completion rating. Bennett actually has more yards on the season. Now, granted, he did have one more game, but you earned that. So Bennett's got 3,425. He only has 20 touchdowns. But as you'll see, hopefully not too much if you're an Ohio State fan in this game, their offense operates, they really spread the ball around. Ohio State's very pass heavy. Georgia will do a lot of things. They've got three different running backs. They've got two tight ends. They really spread it around. They like to do reverses. They like to hand it off. So while he doesn't have the touchdowns in there, he's facilitating a lot of these things. And then he has a 68.1% passer rating as well, or completion percentage. So very, very similar by the numbers. And if you would have told anybody coming into the season that these two quarterbacks are going to have numbers like this, let alone better than CJ or Bennett has more than CJ, everybody would be shocked. I don't think anybody had Stetson Bennett having this kind of year. Everybody thought he would be what he was last year, just kind of a game manager type of guy. But he's not. He's absolutely stepped his game up. You couldn't have two different stats are very similar. The playing style of these guys is incredibly different. Stetson Bennett reminds me, and I'm watching a game last night. I watched a couple games last night of his. I watched the LSU game and I watched the Missouri game. I like to pick out the best and the worst and just kind of see how they react. Stetson Bennett reminds me of the way he moves in the pocket, a bit of a Baker Mayfield. He's very bouncy. He's always moving. He's kind of like a jitterbug. He's quick, very, very quick. I think he runs a sub 4.5 42, so he doesn't look it, but he's actually a very, very good athlete. Maybe a better example would be Ohio State fans won't like this one very much, but Colt McCoy, the old Texas quarterback, smaller guy, but very, very quick and can certainly run. Um, and will run. If you let Stetson Bennett out of the pocket, he will get out and he will move and he will not only make linebackers miss, he'll make them look flat out silly. In the Tennessee game, he made a move up the middle and guy didn't touch him. He was on his butt and scored a touchdown. So he's very athletic. So when he gets outside of the pocket, linebackers and safeties for Ohio State are definitely going to have to drop their hips, break down, and make the tackle, or he'll make you miss. He's not going to run you over. He's very small, but he's a very good runner. He's a very confident runner. Um, he's a bit of a cocky player. Like I said, that Baker Mayfield comes out a little bit in him, but he doesn't let the emotion get the best of him like Baker would do from time to time. He's a respectful player, but he's definitely got a little that in him, and he plays with that chip and he plays with that emotion on his shoulders, and his team loves it. His team feeds off it. I can't remember the last time I've seen a fan base love a quarterback the way Georgia loves Stetson Bennett. And he's got the story. He's a hometown kid. He grew up a Georgia fan. It's everything you would want for a fan base to just adore a quarterback. So it feels like he's got the entire state of Georgia behind him. If he's down, it's they pick him up. He's got that. And then you look over at CJ, almost complete opposite. He's a very cerebral player. He doesn't get too up, he doesn't get too down. Like I said, he's a pocket passer. He can make every single throw in the book. He's going to go top 5 in the NFL draft, first or second quarterback off the board. He's got every measurable you would ever want a quarterback to have. He doesn't play with a lot of emotion, though, and I think that bothers some Ohio State fans because they want to see that fight. They feel like he doesn't care, and I'm sure he does. I mean, I'm sure he cares. He's just a quieter guy. So that's what you're going to see out of CJ. But as far as the fan base being behind him, it's very interesting because it's kind of sad. It's not at all. When this season is over, whatever happens in this game, CJ Stroud will go down as one of the best Ohio State quarterbacks of all time. His numbers say that, his records say that. He has yet to beat Michigan. He did not win a Heisman Trophy. And for whatever reason, I have not been able to figure this out, but this fan base, short of obviously losing to Michigan, but even before that, this fan base never really attached to CJ Stroud the way we did to Justin Fields, the way we did to Dwayne Haskins, the way we did to JT Barrett, to Braxton Miller, to Craig. I mean, the list goes on. This fan base is just detached from him. They like him. They think he's good, not great, some of them even. And you can see in the interviews that CJ feels that. There's a saying in Ohio, you'll see it on T-shirts all around if you're going to the game, Ohio against the world. And that's kind of the mentality Ohio State has always taken because everybody hates Ohio State, as you should, if you're not a Buckeye fan, of course. And a new phrase started going around this week, which I thought was really interesting. In one of the interviews CJ had earlier this week, he mentioned Woody against the world. And Woody is the name of the athletic facility that Ohio State practices in, of course, named after Woody Hayes. So they're feeling, and that's not something I don't think he just came up with. That's probably something that was uttered from a coach. So you could tell that this team, especially this quarterback, is feeling not only the pressure from all the outside, just general college football fans that hate Ohio State, but they're feeling the pressure from this fan base. They don't necessarily feel like this Ohio State fan base is 100% behind them. There was a lot of negative reaction when Ohio State lost to Michigan a couple weeks ago. People want Ryan Day fired. A lot of overreaction, of course. I think reasonable fans are kind of a little more tepid on that and angry, yes, but not so much. But like I said earlier, the smaller portion of the fan base, but it's the loudest portion of the fan base, and they hear it. They're all on social media. They hear it. So you can definitely feel that. So you're going to see two quarterbacks playing a very different emotional battle. Stetson Bennett's going to be riding that emotional high. He's got his fan base behind him. And by the way, this is the third game this season Georgia has played in the Mercedes-Benz. It's not a dome. I don't even know what it is. Stadium over there in Atlanta. So this is kind of their home away from home. It's, depending on how fast you drive, it's a 45-minute drive from Athens to Atlanta. So they're probably going to leave the night before, stay in a hotel. They're fine. They know this process. I don't believe Ohio State has ever played in the Peach Bowl. So this is going to be all new. So they're going to be very comfortable. Ohio State's going to have to play with some sort of edge. CJ is going to have to play with some sort of edge, which I think he will. I think we're going to see a different CJ than we've seen not only all season but all career, because he's talking different. And it just feels a little different. But you're going to see two very different quarterbacks. Style play, of course, but very emotional. It's going to be very, very interesting. Now let's really dig into kind of the style of how these guys play. Bennett, you're going to see him move out of the pocket a lot. They like to get the pocket moving left, right. He can throw, going against the grain, with the grain. Like I said, he's a very athletic quarterback, and you're going to see him throw a lot to these two tight ends, Brock Bowers and Washington. Brock Bowers is the best tight end in the nation, and it's probably not even close. That's his safety blanket. That's where they're going to go to. You're going to see him hand the ball off to him a lot. And the linebackers are going to have to be ready from Ohio State. The linebackers are going to have to be ready for very, very good RPO game. Stetson Bennett runs this very well. The run game is at Georgia is good. Um, it's not great. It's not what it was with Chubb and Sony Michelle, or even what it was last year. I don't feel like, but Bennett brings a different dynamic to their run game because he can absolutely pull it. And he can burn you for not only a touchdown, but a long touchdown. Just ask Tennessee. The first touchdown of that game, I think he scampered for 37 yards and really kind of broke that game open. So he can be a game breaker with his feet. He's got a shockingly strong arm. I would probably say between 30 and 40 yards. He can really zip it in there. His deep ball can be good, hit or miss. It's not perfect, but it's certainly a threat. I would almost describe him as what Michigan wants J.J. McCarthy to become. Very similar runners, very similar body styles. But J.J. McCarthy's deep ball is just not there unless, we blitz. Ohio State blitzes 9 people at the same time, and then you just throw it up in the air. Then you can hit the deep ball. But short of that, you're going to see Stetson Bennett play a lot very much within the offense. He's going to run the play just as designed. And it's going to work. I mean, their offense is very technical. They don't beat you with a whole, don't get me wrong, they've got a lot of skill, but they're not overwhelmingly skilled, short of the tight ends, overwhelmingly skilled receivers. And we'll get into that in a couple episodes. But they just run the scheme, the timing, it's all there. If you remember, Ohio State fans, Justin Fields and Chris Olave connection kind of with those comeback routes, those timing routes, where Olave didn't necessarily beat you with speed and skill, but it was just there. It was just timing. So you're going to see a lot of that, and it's frustrating to watch because you're going to feel like we've got the better athlete here. Why are we getting beat? Their timing is great. They're very, very good. So they're always on the same page, it feels like, when they're rolling. If you go watch the Missouri game, completely different team. If you watch the LSU game to the Missouri game, completely different team, a little bit rattled. This is easier said than done, but it feels like if you can get in their backfield a little bit, get them going backwards, they can very easily be thrown off their schedule. So first and second down for Ohio State are going to be key. George feels and looks and plays a lot like Michigan on steroids, which is not what you want to hear if you're an Ohio State fan because we just lost by 25 points. But that's how they operate. They stay on schedule. They do not get behind the sticks. They're a very disciplined football team. So Ohio State will have to get some tackle for losses on first and second down, and it feels like if you can get them behind the sticks, get them in a 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11, even 3rd and 8 or so, you feel pretty good about that. But again, that's easier said than done. They have a fantastic offensive line. And Bennett just doesn't get off schedule very much. So you're going to have to do some things to disrupt him. And that's what Jim Knowles' defense is designed to do. Obviously, against Michigan, got a little over aggressive, a lot of zero blitzes, a lot of safety blitzes, cornerback blitzes, which can be great for getting an offense off of schedule. Bennett will find it if you make a mistake. He is a very smart quarterback. So if Ohio State has a blown coverage, you can fully expect a 70, 80-yard touchdown. He'll find it. He's a very good quarterback when it comes to pre-snap stuff. He's probably going to see most of these blitzes, but he's going to see a good bit of them coming. They've got film too. They're going to see it. So Ohio State is going to have to be more disciplined on the back end that they've been all year, or they will get burned again. Hopefully not as bad as the Michigan game, but it's certainly there. Like I said, they play like a Michigan on steroids. The running backs aren't quite as good as Michigan, but the quarterback is certainly better. The receivers are there. So that's how you're going to kind of see Stetson Bennett operate this offense. It's not electric, but it's very efficient, and they will use pace. So they'll score on you pretty quick if you're not disciplined. So that's kind of how you're going to see that go. Now, if you're a Georgia fan and if you haven't watched a lot of Ohio State games, and trust me, I live down here, people in the SEC don't like to watch a lot of Big Ten games. They don't necessarily respect it as real football. Now, can't necessarily blame them when we're playing Indiana and Northwestern. They didn't really tune in. So you may not be ultra familiar with Ohio State's offense. And again, very opposite styles is what you're going to see. Ohio State's offense isn't all that disciplined. It feels like, especially if you look in the Michigan game, a lot of penalties. There's a lot of making things up on the run, which CJ is actually very good at. People want him to run, but he's good at the scramble drill. He does a good job there. But you're gonna see. I take that back. I don't know if we're gonna see this. Ryan Day, the last, I would say, going back about 4 or 5 weeks, has turned into a different play caller. And it feels like CJ has turned into a bit of a different quarterback, a little bit safer, which is not good against this Georgia team. You cannot play that way. Bubble screens are not going to get the job done. Running the ball on 3rd and 9 is not going to get the job done. Ohio State CJ is going to have to play aggressive. He's going to have to push the ball down the field. He's going to have to trust his receivers when they're covered to throw the ball. One of my biggest criticisms of this Ohio State offense all year long is it feels like Ryan Day has to draw up the perfect play for it to work. They've got to be, a couple years ago when Alabama had Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith and all those cats, they use the term Alabama open, where these guys were running 5, 6, 10 yards open. Well, we use the same thing here at Ohio State, and I say we at Ohio State. I'm here in Georgia. I don't know why I keep saying that, but it's Ohio State open. It feels like Ryan Day has to draw up that play, and if CJ doesn't see that the play is worked perfectly as designed, well, he just won't let go of the ball sometimes, and he won't just let Marvin Harrison Jr., Ibuka, go get the ball. Sometimes you just got to recognize you've got a better guy, and you're just going to let him go fight for the ball. You're going to give him a chance. And it doesn't seem like they're letting go of that, or at least they haven't let go of that in the last couple games. They're trying to play very technical, which is fine sometimes, but in a game like this, you're absolutely going to have to let it rip. Excuse me. They're going to have to let it rip down the field, and they're going to watch a lot of that LSU game because LSU had a backup quarterback come in and threw for over 500 yards in less than 4 quarters. So the opportunities will be there. Georgia's defense is not what it was last year. It's really not even close to what it was last year for 2 reasons. Last year's Georgia defense was an absolute all-time defense. Incredible. I mean, first rounders all over the board. This defense has a couple first rounders, but they've got some work to do, especially in the secondary. You're going to see a guy, number 5 for Georgia, Kelee Ringo. I think and I hope Ohio State will key on him. He's very good. He's very athletic. He's the guy who made the game-winning interception last year and ran it back for a touchdown. So he's got the skill. He's a 5-star guy. And, he'll be a first-rounder next year. I believe he's a sophomore this year. But he's pretty raw, and he can make some mistakes. And he's going to be on Marvin Harrison Jr. most of the game, I suspect. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best wide receiver in the nation. I know Jalen Hyatt won it from Tennessee. I don't care. That guy, he's a good to great receiver. Anybody who knows football watches these 2 guys. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best receiver in college football, hands down. Ryan Day and CJ Stroud are going to have to, if they want a chance in this game, are going to have to let Marvin Harrison Jr. make plays when he's covered. They're going to have to throw the ball to him when he's not exactly Ohio State open, Alabama open. They're going to have to just throw the ball to him on the break, on time, and let them play. They're going to have to cut it loose. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to do that. That's the thing Ohio State fans are worried about. If If Ohio State gets Ryan Day play calling that they saw against Clemson in the playoff game 2 years ago, then I think Ohio State has a very, very good chance to win this game. But if we get play calling from this year, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. All right, looks like we finally got a comment in. Looks like John Gray. Do you think we see Ohio State's running backs pass blocking more on passing downs rather than running routes against a very good Georgia defensive line? Um, yes. Well, okay. So this is kind of another episode, but that's a really good question. Georgia doesn't blitz a lot. They trust their front four to get home. Jalen Carter, number 88, we'll dig into him. He will be the first defensive player off the board in the NFL draft. He's an incredible defensive tackle. So when you have guys like that, you don't need to blitz, so they're not going to blitz a lot. So to answer your question, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of blocking from the Ohio State running backs. We're going to see some, obviously, but I think you're going to see a lot of five wide from Ohio State, and we're going to trust Ohio State's going to trust their front five to block their front four. They're a very athletic front four, so I'm not sure. And of course, considering Ohio State's running back room is pretty banged up right now, I think we're going to see Ohio State lean on the passing game even more. Mayan Williams for Ohio State should be back 100%, but quite frankly, this Ohio State medical staff has botched a couple things this year, so we don't really know. We don't really know what we're going to see out of Mayan Williams or Dallin Hayden or even Trip Trainum, who is a transfer linebacker out of Arizona State who got the bulk of the carries versus Michigan. I think we're going to see a lot of Mayan Williams. I think we're going to lean on him heavily because physically it feels like he matches up better against this Georgia team. Dallin Hayden, I think he's a good running back, but he's a true freshman. He's not a guy that's built for this type of game. So we're not going to see a lot of him. And if we don't see a lot of Dallin Hayden, I don't think we're going to see a lot of passes out of the backfield. Mayan Williams can catch the ball out of the backfield, but he's nowhere near dynamic. So I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of pass pro out of the running backs this week. It's just not where the strength is going to be. Could see a little bit, maybe some screens or so, but if you watch Mayan Williams, you know that's not his game. It's downhill running. So I don't think we're going to set him up for a whole lot of screens. He's not J.K. Dobbins. He's not Travion Henderson. He's not Zeke. He's none of those things. He's very different. Well, you could compare him to Zeke a little bit as far as physical running style. He doesn't have that breakaway speed. Good question, though. Very good question. CJ tends to trust his blocking pretty well, and the blocking has been good this year. Ohio State's kept him clean, so I think we'll be fine up front. Going to have to move. He's going to have to run, not necessarily down the field for yardage, but he's going to have to scramble, which he's done all year. So I think he'll be fine in that regards. But back to what I was saying, Ohio State's offense and CJ are going to have to let this thing rip if they want to have a chance in this game. Because this Georgia team, just like this Michigan team we saw a couple weeks ago, will choke you out of a game if you make mistakes. They will run the ball down. When they get a lead, they will run the ball down your throat and they will choke you out. They'll get the ball and you won't see it for another 8 minutes. That's exactly how it will go. So Ohio State's going to want to turn this thing into a track meet. With that being said, we can look at how they attacked Tennessee. They stopped Hendon Hooker pretty much. They pretty much ended his Heisman campaign in Athens. So they've got the ability to stop a very, very good offense like us. But Ohio State's going to have to let it rip. Ryan Day, we're going to need to see the play calling from the Clemson game if Ohio State is going to have a chance in this. So that's kind of what you're going to see out of these two quarterbacks. You're going to see a very confident guy in Stetson Bennett coming in. He's played here. This is his third year at Georgia. He's played in this stadium several times. He's going to look and feel and probably have full control of this offense. And you're going to see a guy in CJ Stroud. I don't know, if I'm being completely honest. And I haven't even decided who I think is going to win this game because I don't know what kind of look CJ Stroud's going to have in his eyes. We don't know. It's going to be very interesting. He could play with an edge, he could play with a fearlessness that we haven't seen. We'll see. We will see. When it comes down to these guys, Stetson Bennett, his biggest advantage over CJ Stroud is Stetson Bennett has the moments. He's got the title last year. He's got the scramble at Tennessee this year. Um, when you think of Stetson Bennett's career, the team would lean on him when they need something, and he will usually produce in a big, big way. Even if he's having a bad game, he will come up with a big moment when a big moment is needed, even if he's having a bad game. CJ Stroud has had a fantastic career at Ohio State so far. And in the games he's lost as a starter against Oregon, against Michigan twice, he's Oregon he didn't play well, but he played okay. He had a couple turnovers, but it was his third or second start as a quarterback, so you can expect that. And the two Michigan losses, obviously fans are very, very critical of him. But if you actually watch the game and you look at the numbers, he played very well in both games, especially last year in Ann Arbor. I actually thought CJ was the only reason him and Jackson Smith-Njigba were the only reason Ohio State was even in that game. He was hanging in there, taking hits. Ohio State couldn't block for him. They had Aiden Hutchinson coming off the edge. I think had 3 or 4 sacks. And he hung in there and he made throw after throw, play after play. But at the end of the day, what do we remember as fans? We remember moments. And that moment wasn't there. It never came to fruition when it came time to, all right, here we go, time, we got a chance to win this game. And whether it was his fault or not is irrelevant. The moment wasn't there. It didn't happen. In this year's Michigan game, again, he played well. He had a couple late turnovers, but other than that, he played well. He played safe. But when you play safe like that, it just doesn't lend itself to the moment. And he didn't have that moment this year in the Michigan game. I think there was a chance for it. If you remember watching that game, it was midway through the third quarter. Ohio State was starting to get some momentum back, and it was about a 3rd and 8 or so, or 4th and 8. And CJ wanted to go for it. You could see he was ready to go. He was actually showing some emotion, which was great. Ohio State fans loved it, and Ryan Day put it on the field. We punted the ball, and the rest is history. But it felt like that could have been his moment right there too. He's calling to the sideline. He wants to go for it, goes for it, and gets it. And he didn't get that. He was pulled off the field for that. And in looking at a small picture, I don't know that that's a huge deal. But if you look big picture and you look at the confidence that these two guys are coming in with, if that's Georgia and Stetson Bennett's on the field, they're going for that 9 out of 10 times because they fully trust Stetson Bennett's going to get the job done. They feel like their offense is built for those moments. Even though they're not the better offense, they feel like they're built for those moments. Ohio State feels like if it gets off schedule, it's let's play it safe, let's pump the ball, which wasn't Ryan Day 2 and 3 years ago. Very different play caller. So the mentality of these two quarterbacks coming into this game is interesting because, like I said, Stetson Bennett has those moments in his back pockets. He knows how he's going to react in those singular, huge plays in the game. CJ hasn't experienced that yet. He doesn't know. He just doesn't know what that feels like. Yeah, he's thrown a game-winning touchdown. And you can look at the Rose Bowl last year if you want to point to a moment for CJ. But at the end of the day, that was an exhibition game. I'm sure it meant a lot to the players, but it was a Rose Bowl against a very, very bad Utah defense. And he made a game winning touchdown throw. That was probably his peak moment. But in a playoff game, in a Michigan game, it hasn't been there. So again, we don't know how CJ is going to react. We don't know what it's going to be. We don't know what the play calling is going to be. Georgia feels like a known commodity coming into this game. Their offense feels like a known commodity coming into this game. Ohio State is the wild card, which we've Ohio State's played that well in the past, obviously. A lot of people say it feels like this matchup is the Ohio State versus Alabama in the very first college football playoff. I certainly hope so. I think it's very, very different. Very, very different because that feeling was Ohio State was truly playing with house money. Cardale Jones was truly playing with house money. If Cardale Jones went into that game against Alabama and threw 3 picks, 150 yards, and a touchdown, nobody would have really blamed him. They would have said, ah, shucks, you're the third string quarterback. It's your second game as a starter. It is what it is. CJ Stroud is playing for his legacy. This is his legacy game. Right now, his legacy at Ohio State is being trashed. It's not good at all. And if he doesn't play well in this game, or I wouldn't even say that, CJ Stroud has to win this game if he wants to leave behind a what is looked at as a good legacy at Ohio State. Stetson Bennett has that. Stetson Bennett is a hero in Athens. He'll never have to buy lunch again in Athens. I don't know what his NIL deals are, but I'm sure he's got some. I don't know if he's going to have a pro career ahead of him, but that kid can live in Atlanta and in Athens for the rest of his life, and he will be perfectly fine. He'll go on the radio. He'll do whatever he wants. CJ Stroud's legacy is on the line this game, and he is very aware of that. If you look at his comments after the Michigan game, he was ultra aware. He understood. He even said, I know what people are going to say. I know that I never beat Michigan, and I'm going to have to eat that, were his words. So he knows what his legacy stands currently right now. So the feeling that Ohio State had playing against Alabama, that house money feeling, that's not this feeling right now, because the expectation at Ohio State, just like it is at Georgia, is to make the college football playoff. And, well, first of all, at Ohio State, the expectation is to beat Michigan. It's to win the Big Ten championship. And then it's to make the college football playoff and be competitive. You can't, unless you're Alabama, your expectations every year can't be go win a national championship. And if not, we're upset with you. It can't be that. But those 3 goals right there are very attainable for an Ohio State team that, let's be honest, plays in a horrible conference other than 1 to maybe 2 teams. This year, it's really only 1 team. The only other team was Michigan in this conference. It was very attainable goals. And Ohio State, yes, like I said, has backdoored their way into this thing. But they're here nevertheless. So the expectations from fans, no matter how they feel about the team right now, are still the same. If this Ohio State team goes out there and gets beat by 25 points and CJ Stroud throws for 170 yards, 2 picks, and a touchdown, CJ Stroud will be almost forgotten about in 5 years. People will not remember him fondly. Sure, he'll be welcome back, but he certainly won't be a hero. So there is no house money. I don't buy into that CJ Stroud is playing with house money. I think CJ Stroud is playing with more pressure than he probably has ever played with his entire career, short of the Michigan game, or maybe even more, because he knows if he wins this game, who's waiting on the other side, more than likely, will be Michigan. So there's a lot. There's a lot on his shoulders. I think he can handle it, but it remains to be seen. We're certainly going to find out a lot about Ryan Day, and we're going to find out a lot about CJ Stroud. They seem to be linked at the hip. They have very similar personalities. Same with Stetson Bennett and Kirby Smart. Very fire guys, very emotional. So it's going to be a very interesting game of chess how this game goes along, to see how each quarterback handles these emotions. And if CJ Stroud gets a bad start, how does he respond to that? Does it snowball, or is he able to turn that around? I don't know. He typically doesn't have it. He's a pretty even keel quarterback, so I don't see that. But again, how does CJ handle that emotion? I think is going to be the biggest wild card in this game. If he plays with an edge, it's gonna be a great game. If he doesn't, I could see it getting pretty bad pretty early, unfortunately. So that's what that looks like for the quarterbacks. Very interesting matchup. Two very good quarterbacks. So it's gonna be a fun one. It's gonna be a fun story to watch. Well, boys and girls, that was the very first episode of Almost Athletic. This has been a lot of fun. If you left other comments and I didn't see them, I am sorry. We'll go back and we'll respond. We will be on early next week. I think we're going to be coming on a Tuesday.